14. And this is just a great example of how God works as we are trying to do what God wants us to do, okay? Verse 14. This is a story of Lydia. And you guys, you know this story, right? You've got these ladies that are meeting down by a river, and they are worshiping. As I said yesterday, I don't know where the men were, okay? But these ladies, they are meeting to worship God, and Paul comes up, and he starts teaching these ladies about Jesus, and well, notice what happened. One of those listening was a woman named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth from the city of Thyatira, who was a worshiper of God, and what? And what? The Lord, God, opened her what? Opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. You see God working there. And that's how God is going to work through you. God is going to give us those opportunities. That's what I'm fixing to share with you. And it is God who is going to open those hearts to receive the Word, to receive Jesus that you are trying to give to them. Okay? But knowing, again, God is the key component. And as I said yesterday, knowing that God is the key component, we need to give this to God. Listen, church, we have got to be people of prayer. We have got to start lifting up the lost before God. How many of you know someone who's lost? Who's not a Christian? Who doesn't even know anything about Jesus? Let me tell you something. You need to start a list. And you need to start praying for these people. We need to start getting on our knees and lifting them up before God. One of the things I've come to realize, okay, over the last 20 years of my ministry is this. There is so much that I cannot do for people as a minister. I can't. But there is one thing that I can do, and that is I can pray. And you know what? That's better than anything else that I can do, because I'm lifting them up before the one who can do what they need for their life. And so you come to our congregation, we have a prayer room. Okay? And in that prayer room, we've got names of people who are struggling physically, they're struggling in their marriages, but we also have a list of names that have been turned in from our congregation of people that they know who are lost. And I go into that room, and our members go into that room, and they pray over these people. And Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the boards, we've got over 3 boards. My cell phone is just blown up of names that I go through every week. Because I realize that this is the greatest thing that I can do. Is put them in the hands of God. And let me tell you something. It is amazing what happens when you give these individuals to God. Okay, so I want to start with my first story this morning. Okay, and we're just going to go through this. It's going to be bang, bang, bang. We're going to go through all these stories. And again, you're going to hear these stories. You're going to be like, I might be a minister to do that. I don't have to have a Bible degree to do that. I can just be me. I can just use my gifts and my talents, okay? So here's the first story, and I want to start off, since we've already begun, with prayer. When I was at Robertsdale, I was there preaching for 14 years, and man, I became convicted of prayer. This is really where this began. I did a series on prayer, and I told the congregation there, I said, listen, this is what I want to challenge you to do. I want you to write down the names of people that you know, neighbors, friends, co-workers, that are lost, and I want you to commit. Okay, this takes a big commitment from you. I want you to commit to praying into these individuals every single day. I will commit to praying. I was going to challenge you guys every day as well. Okay? And so there were several people who started praying for every single day, and I feel front and back of that. Names of people. Then I added on to that. I told our congregation, I said, if there are any names that you would like to be prayed for, and man, let me tell you something, it was amazing how God began to work. mean, it was amazing because when someone would come to Christ, I would mark their name off the list. Not that I would pray for them any less, but to show me, okay, this one's come to Christ, this one's come to Christ. And it was absolutely amazing what began to happen. There was a guy who ended up on my list by the name of Ryan. Ryan didn't believe in God. And how I met Ryan was his girlfriend, Summer. She attended our congregation at Robertsdale. And she came up to me one Sunday and she said, listen, she said, me and my boyfriend, we want to get married. She said, will you do it? I said, absolutely. I said, no problem. I said, but I have a requirement. You have to go through my premarital counseling. He said, well, let me ask my boyfriend about that. So she went and talked to him. He said, no problem, but he wants you to know that he doesn't believe in all this God stuff. And I said, that's great. I said, but I want you to know, okay, pass this back to him. I want Brian to know that when he goes through my premarital counseling, I'm going to lay out that God has to be the foundation of your marriage. If you want a strong marriage, if you want a blessed family, then guess what? He's got to be the foundation or the home begins to crumble. So she goes back, she relays the message back to me. He said, that's okay, just know, he's not all into this God stuff. I said, no problem. So sure enough, we get into the premarital counseling. And we're talking about God, and He's our foundation, and I just remember Ryan looks at me and he said, and he's probably in his early 20s. And he looks at me and he says, I just want you to know, he said, I just don't believe all this stuff. I said, you know what? I said, Ryan, pray for it. And he said, well, thank you. I appreciate that. So I kept my promise. I married Summer and Brian. And Summer, started inviting Brian to come to services with her. And occasionally, I think at first just to tease her, he would come occasionally. Well, I'm praying for Brian. He's on my hit list, okay? I'm praying for him. Let me tell you something, Brian. You can't escape God. So he is on my list. And I'm praying for him, and he comes one Sunday when we have put in the bulletin that we're thinking about starting a church league softball team. And Brian reads this, and he comes up to me excited after services, and he says, hey man, he said, y'all starting up a church league softball team? I said, we are. And he said, well, I love softball. He said, can I play? And I said, Brian, you can, but I said, this league has strict rules, and you have to be in attendance on a regular basis. I said, this is a church league, and they don't want ringers coming in, people just going out recruiting people who are good at softball. And I said, and I get that. And I said, you have to commit to that. Would you be willing? He said, yeah. I said, I do that. I said, okay, great. So he starts playing softball with us. And he starts getting to know a lot of the guys, within our congregation. And he's coming on a regular basis. And one Sunday, I stand up and I start preaching on the forgiveness of Jesus. And how we are forgiven because of the power of His blood and the sacrifice that He made, and how valuable we are to Him because of what He did for us. And I just remember, man, everybody cleared out after that lesson was over. I walked into the auditorium, and Brian was in there by himself. And I said, hey, Brian, what's going on, man? And he says, I got to ask you a few questions. I said, okay, sure, hit it. He said, you made a statement. You said that through the power of Jesus, we can be forgiven of anything we've ever done. Is that true? I said, yes. He said, anything? I said, yes. And he said, what if you've been in a game? What if you have shot people? I said, yeah, you forgive. He said, what if you've done drugs? What if you've been sexually active? I said, yeah, you could be forgiven of those things. He said, I want to become a Christian. And so we sat down and I began to tell him, more about Jesus and this commitment that he was making. And he said, man, I am ready to be baptized. It was just me and Neil. And we go back there, and I've never had anything like this happen in my life. This guy is in his 20s, and I take him and I baptize him, and when I bring him up out of the water, he starts sobbing like a baby. I mean, he is just boo-hoo. I'll just say it scared me to death. I mean, I was like, did I hit him? Did I hit his head? Did I physically harm him? Hold him under too long? What happened? I said, Brian, are you okay? I said, what's going on? And for a moment, he couldn't even speak. And then these were the words that came out of his mouth. I got children. I'm sorry. These were the words that came out of his mouth. He said, so Jesus could forgive someone. And man, I hugged him, and we went downstairs, and he started cleaning himself up. And then after that, we went back into the auditorium, and he sat down right there on the front pew. And I said, "Are you okay?" He said, I just need to sit here for a moment. He said, "This is just, man, this is so overwhelming to me." But the power of prayer. God who said, "You know what? I don't believe in this guy." And then God opens up these opportunities, and He opens up this guy's heart, and here he is, he's weeping like a baby because God has forgiven him. Then now he has this hope. Let me share with you some other stories. When we were in Robertsdale, we bought a small house, and one day I was out mowing my yard. I remember like it was yesterday. I was in my overalls. I'm from Alabama, and I look like a country hick out there. And mowing my yard, and all of a sudden next door, this big U-Haul pulls up. And out of that U-Haul pops this young couple about our age. And it's just a husband and a wife, and these two are trying to unload this truck by themselves. And I mean, I see this lady, and I mean, she's struggling, and they're trying to unload, so I immediately get off the mower. I go in, I said, Julie, I said, I think we've got some new neighbors. And I said, it's just two of them. And I said, this lady doesn't need to be moving all this stuff. I said, I'm just going to go offer my help. I don't know if they'll let me or not. She said, well, just tell them that I'll cook dinner for them tonight. They won't have to worry about that either. And so I go over, and I just said, hey, guys, my name's Slade. And I guess we're your neighbors. And I said, it looks like you guys need some help. Would you allow me to help? And he looked at me, his eyes were this big. He goes, are you serious? And I said, yeah. I said, man, I would love to help you guys. And he said, man, I would love to help. I said, well, your wife doesn't need to be doing this. I said, you just go inside, you point us to where you want us to put stuff. And I said, by the way, my wife is cooking dinner, so you don't have to worry about that. And she was like, oh, you are kidding me. I was like, no. So anyway, we start unloading this big U-Haul, and she's pointing us, and we get the stuff where it needs to be. And then after that, my wife brings over food, and we talk for a few minutes, and then we go home. And then, after that, every time, we'd see each other out and about. And then a couple of weeks later, they had a dog. And Jonathan decided, you know what, that dog doesn't need to be in the house. I need to put up a chain link fence. So again, I remember like it's yesterday, man, I'm on this mower, and again, it's a Saturday, typical mow, okay? So he starts trying to put up this chain link fence. So I go inside, and I told Julie, I can't let him do this by himself. I don't know anything about tools, but I can dig a hole. And so I go out there, and Jonathan's out there working, trying to fix his chain link fence. And I said, listen, man, I said, I don't know how to use tools, okay? I mean, that's not my gift. I said, but I can do physical labor. I can dig holes, I can hand you stuff. And immediately, he was down working, he pops up, and he goes, what church do you go to? I'm being serious. And I said, funny you ask. I'd not even told him I was a minister. I said, funny you ask. I said, I'm a minister at the Robertsdale Church of Christ. And he goes, let me tell you something. I want to come to your church. And I said, man, we would love for you to come to our church. And guess what? He came. Him and his wife, and they were coming for a while, and and we would, see each other out in the yard. He would come up and he would say, "I've got some questions for you." And so he would start asking me questions, and then, our family, we hit it off. We started double dating, we would get a babysitter, and our kids would play together, and we would go out on dates and stuff as couples, and they would just keep asking questions, and we would just keep trying to give them answers. And I remember one night we were over at their house till 5 o'clock in the morning. No lie. And he is just asking me one question after another. Then finally his wife, Amanda, speaks up, and she said, "Let me tell you something. You're not leaving here until you baptize me in Christ." And I was like, "Oh man." Jonathan says, "I want to be baptized too." So we baptized them into Christ at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they're just awesome people. But you see what I'm saying? You don't have to be a preacher to do that. You don't have to have any spiritual training really to serve someone, to love someone, to help them, just being a neighbor. Now, at some point, don't misunderstand me, you got to tell them about Jesus. You got to share your faith. But, just the start of it, just loving and serving. Let me tell you about another lady. Her name is Jan. And I'll never forget, I got a call from one of our elders' wives. And she said, "Slade," she said, "one of my coworkers, her husband, is in his 50s, he just died of a heart attack." And she is absolutely devastated. I mean, he was her world. And she said, "Would you go out and would you just pay her a visit?" And I was like, "Oh man, I would love to if she'll let me." She doesn't even know me. And she said, "Well, let me call you back." So she called. She said that would be fine. She would love to talk to someone. So I called up a guy that goes to church with us, and I said, "Will you go over there with me to see this lady?" And so we go knock at the door. I mean, she breaks down. She's just so devastated. He was her world. And so we went in and we just talked to her, and we prayed with her. And then after it was over, she began to apologize. She was like, "Thank you so much for coming." She said, "I'm so sorry that my house is such a wreck." She said, "I mean, I would have cleaned it up. I'm just so devastated. I can't even collect my thoughts. I'm so sorry." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what." I said, "You got 2 able bodies right here." I said, "Let's clean your house." And she said, "No, I can't let you do that." I said, "Well, we're going to do it whether you want us or not." I said, "Where's your vacuum?" And she points me to the vacuum, and I start vacuuming her floor, and the guy with me, he starts dusting, and after he gets done dusting, he starts mopping, and I go over in the kitchen, there's a pile of dishes, and so I'm just washing these dishes, and then after we clean her house, we leave. I kid you not. Over a year later, a little lady walks in. I was standing in the auditorium greeting people as they were coming in. A little lady comes up to me and she says, "Hey, Slade, how are you?" I said, "Good. How are you?" And I guess she could tell by that response, you have no clue who I am. And she looks at me, she goes, "You don't know who I am, do you? You don't remember me?" And I said, "No, ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't remember you." She said, "You came to my house over a year ago. And you prayed with me, you and the other gentlemen, and y'all cleaned my house, and Sandy, my coworker who attends here, she brought us food, and she said, I just remember saying to myself, when I can get to where I can be around people, when I can get to where I can just, deal with this matter," she said, "I am going to that church." And she said, "I'm here." And I said, "Man, we're so glad that you're here." People just embraced her, loved on her, and ended up baptizing her into Christ. And man, she's just an awesome Christian lady. I actually went back to preach a funeral not too long ago, and she was one of the first people I got to see as I was walking in the door. But you see how simple that is? I mean, that's nothing big. That's nothing to do with me. It's just God giving us opportunities, and God opening doors and breaking hearts, or opening hearts rather, to the gospel of Christ. Now, I want to go back to my neighborhood here in Robertsdale, because we started having more neighbors move in. This was a kind of a newer neighborhood. And there was a couple that moved in across the street. And Julie and I, we just started interacting with them. We met them. Her husband was an electrician, and he was on the go quite a bit at first. But then he got to come home, and so along with Jonathan and Amanda, we started going out with them, celebrating birthdays with our kids, and we just built this relationship with them as well. Well, over time, she started coming to church. And her husband didn't at first, but then she started working on him, and he started coming to church as well, chatting to Tina. And I'll never forget, one day they invited us over, and he's out in the backyard grilling. They want to do something special for us. And it's just me and Chad on the back porch, and he's grilling shrimp, and he looks over at me, and he's kind of a fly guy. You just have to know that. So this was a really big deal. He looks over at me, and he says, "Thank you." I said, "Thank you for what?" I said, "Dude, you're the one grilling the shrimp and having us over at your house." And I said, "Thank you for what?" He said, "Because I didn't even know the Lord." And he said, "You brought me and my wife to the Lord. You have changed my family." And he said, "I just want to thank you. Thank you for doing that." Next to them, another family moves in. And he was in the Coast Guard. He was gone quite a bit. The husband, this was his second marriage, and his new wife, while he was gone, was taking care of her stepdaughter, which was Taylor. And Taylor was about the same age as our girls, and so she would come out, and she would play with our girls, and she would come to birthdays with our girls. And, there were some occasions where we would invite Taylor over to eat, to hang out with our kids. Just a sweet girl. And this was a big deal for Taylor because her stepmom, and she was very open about this, her stepmom was very open about this, she didn't cook. Her dad was a cook and he was always gone. And so, she would tell Taylor, "If you're hungry, go get a frozen dinner out of the freezer." And so that's all she had. So when she ate Miss Julie's cooking, you think this girl hadn't eaten in years, man. She is throwing it down, and so much. She's like, "Thank you, Miss Julie. Thank you so much for letting me eat with y'all." And so finally, over time, we just said, "Taylor, would you like to go to church with us?" And Taylor said, "Oh, I would love to." And I said, "You can come eat lunch with us after." And that was a really big deal, She got to get some really good food. And so my wife, I'm usually there a lot earlier, so my wife on the way to church would pick up Taylor, and then her stepmom and her dad have another little girl, and we invited her to come, and so she started coming with our family as well. We invited the mom and dad. They weren't interested at the time, but we started bringing these two kids to services. And over time, those two girls had a chance to go with us to Maywood Christian Camp. And over time, Taylor came up to me at camp. Oh. Jerry, you okay, buddy? Yeah. Where was I? Taylor. Okay, so Taylor comes to me and she wants to be baptized in Christ. And then over time, it was amazing what was happening. What happened was this kind of sparked some interest in her stepmom, Janet. And Janet, she wouldn't come on Sunday mornings because she was very open about it. She said, "I like sleeping in." I said, "Okay." So she would come on Sunday night. And then in time, her mom came down, and her mom started coming with her. And so ends up, this whole family starts attending services, and it's just from picking these little girls up for services. Do you know any kids in your neighborhood? Do you know any families that you can minister to in that way. Hey, you know what? We want to invite you to church. If you don't want to come, hey, we can take your kids. We would love to. And here's what it ended up being at first for Janet. It was, hey, this gives me a chance to sleep in and not have to worry about the kids. But then in time, when they saw what was taking place with these kids, and the love that we had for those kids, it also attracted them to come as well. Now, Janet and her mom, as far as I know, never made that commitment. Julie and I, we left shortly after they started coming, and so I don't know exactly what has taken place, but hopefully a seed has been planted in that family. So pray for them, and also Taylor's dad. Another story. I'm a sports guy. How many of you like sports? Okay, great. My girls love sports as well. They wanted to play softball, especially my daughter, Lisa. And so my mentality is this: you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. And so I wanted my daughter to get the best coaching, right, that she could possibly get. And so I started coaching this ball team. And before we went out there, we got in trouble for this a couple of times, but we just did it anyway. We would pray with the kids. And then after the game, we would pray with the kids, and we would say, listen, if you don't want to be a part of our prayer, then you don't have to be. And some of the parents would come and take the kids, and they would kind of go off to the side. That's okay. We don't want to force that on anyone. But we would pray with the kids. And there was a couple that really didn't like any of the other coaches they'd ever had. But they let me know that they really liked me and Miss Julie. And we also had another coach at the time, Jeannie, and they liked us. And so one day we invited them to come to services. We invited all of our families. Hey, we would love to have you come be a part of our services at Robertsdale. Well, this family that I'm referring to, they came up and they said, well, listen. She said, myself and my boyfriend, she said, we work on Sundays, but she said, we love our kids to go to church with, and they love you guys. And I was like, well, we would love to go and pick them up. And so anyway, my wife basically started a bus ministry. She started picking up Taylor and her sister, and then she would drive out in the middle of nowhere to this trailer, and she would pick up these two other girls that were on our ball team, and she started bringing them to services, and over time, those girls both became Christians as well. They're still going. Families from Robertsdale have picked up where we left off, and they're going and they're picking them up. And Brittany, the oldest sister, she will call us on occasion. She is hilarious. I wish you guys could meet her. She's just funny. She calls us and she wants to talk to us. And that's been going on for the last 3 years. But softball, who would ever thought? And not only that, the lady who was coaching with us, Jeannie, we invited her to services, and my wife, especially, Jeannie, why don't you come to church with us? And Jeannie says, I'll tell you why. She said, because you guys dress up. And she said, all I have is what you see, and that's shorts and a t-shirt. This is how I dress. I'm not going to go out and buy a new dress to come to services. She said, this is who I am. And Julie said, I'll wear that. She goes, you would not. She said, you're the preacher's wife. She goes, are you kidding me? She said, I'll wear shorts to services. She said, you won't. She said, I will. She said, you just show up in your shorts. And she said, I'll be wearing my shorts too. Guess what? She showed up on Sunday wearing her shorts and her t-shirt. Let me tell you something. My wife is wearing her shorts and t-shirt. And she said, come down here and sit with me. And she did. And the whole point I want you to see in that is, God doesn't look at the outward appearance. And I'm going to tell you something about my wife. My wife is so awesome. She said, from this point on, she said, when I go to services, if this is going to keep people from coming, she said, I'm not dressing up anymore. She said, because I'm not dressing up to impress God. He sees the heart, not the outward appearance. And so I'm stopping that kind of stuff, especially if it's going to keep someone else or discourage someone else from hearing the gospel. And so just another family from Robertsdale that started coming and were a part of our services because of, us just trying to be who Jesus wants us to be. And if we make mistakes, we fail in that, we fail miserably. You guys pray for us, we will pray for you. But I believe with all my heart that it is the power of God. And through His power, He can even use people like me. Tim Archer did an awesome job in the last class. I would encourage you guys to get a copy of that. He gave the greatest example. He said, who was it that ministered to Balaam? Or who did God speak to Balaam through? A donkey. And Tim said, if God can use a donkey to get His message across, he said, He can use me. And I'm telling you, if He can use this donkey to reach the lost, let me tell you something, He can use you as well. And so keep that in your mind.